Welcome back to the Story Lens podcast, where your stories are focus. Thanks for joining us today. We have Taylor Smith today. She has joined us once again. She is an attorney in the family office space and has some great wisdom about family office structure. So today we jump into the idea of a multifamily office, a single family office, what those structures bring to a family, why they would want to engage that form of structure. And it's a great conversation. We cover a broad waterfront and look forward to you joining the conversation. We'll go ahead and jump right in.
Welcome to the Story Lens podcast, where your story is our focus. We explore wealth, legacy, and purpose through a process that starts with deep listening and leads to one-of-a-kind strategies. At Story One, we believe the best planning begins with you.
Welcome back to the Story Lens podcast. We are joined again by Taylor Smith. So today's conversation, we're jumping into structure a little bit. There's this term family office, multifamily office. There's these hybrid models. It's language that remains nebulous oftentimes. And so with Taylor's expertise, we want to jump in to what does structure look like? What do these terms mean? And how do they make sense? So Taylor, as you've been working in this ultra high net worth or family office space, when families come to you and say, okay, we've reached this new level of net worth, we kind of recognize that complexity is on the horizon or has arrived. How do we build the structure? What do we need? How do we build a family office? Like, where do you start with that family?
Where do you start with that? Yes. So, it's interesting how people get to us, because more and more I'm finding clients will say in a discovery call, my brother told me that I need a family office, or I read this online, family office. And still there's I think, massive misunderstanding about what it is, even within the industry. CPAs will think of a family office being something different than maybe an attorney. So, I try
Well, then you throw the private equity or VC family offices in there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People will say, if you're raising capital, you're not a family office, right? There's just so many ways to look at it, and you can listen to, there's so many conferences, and there's so much out there, information, not all of it right. Some very rigid views are things like, it's not a family office unless it's 500 million or more. I don't fall into that camp. I think there's a lot of different ways, and there's many iterations of how you can approach actually having this structure. But the way I like to describe it to clients is the family office is born when a family has amassed a pile, they've built the pile, and the pile is so big that they need help taking care of it. And if they want some tax benefits and deductions that they haven't previously had access to before, they might want to consider building a family office.
That's a pretty simple explanation. It's a pile.
It's a pile.
It's a really big
Build a pile. The pile's big. We need help. Somebody get over here.
Yeah.
So, more often than not, I'm working with Gen 1 wealth creators. And if we're there in time, we are pre-liquidity, pre-appreciation planning, which is the best place to be.
Sure.
Where we can get all the bang for the buck from a lifetime exemption standpoint. But a typical family office structure will involve the family office, which the way I like to describe this is kind of a floating nebulous entity that sits on top of everything, not necessarily as a massive owner. It has a relationship to all the underlying assets and their LLCs and all the properties and all that stuff. But it's the director. It manages, it is all oversight, all of the control and operations. It's the brains of the whole operation. Right?
Strategy and governance.
Strategy and governance. They have an eye on everything, and they are the director and have a say-so in every piece. That's really where the family sits, right? So families always want to know, you keep telling me I have to give all my stuff away into these trusts, that I'm not even a trustee. Like, what the heck? What do you mean I still have access to this? So they want to know, at the end of the day, I'm still calling the shots on the things I could call shots on. Or if it's not me, it's people of my choosing, right? So there's, in a traditional technical family office, there is an entity which manages, right?
Right.
And it is in relationship with very commonly a family holdco, holding company. This is what I call the treasure chest, because this is where all the stuff sits. Okay, all the assets are going to live inside this house. And that can look different across families. Commonly, it's a holding company. We do a lot in Delaware. We do a lot in Wyoming. We work co-counsel with a group in Chicago who uses Alaska for quite a bit. And there's boring technical reasons behind why we choose those that I will not take us down those roads. But we build the houses, right, that are going to hold and isolate, for asset protection purposes, different buckets of assets. So in a perfect world, if my house is in order, I have a bucket that holds things like real property, right? And so in relationship to my family office, the family office can say, hey, we're going to charge a property management fee, reasonable market rate to pull income up to my family office where my client family sits. They can earn money, right? Draw their income through the family office. They still have control of their children over time, right? We contemplate that there is participation across generations, that there's some sort of structure to how decisions are made, and that we're all moving in the right direction. So the underlying assets, huge mix. Every family is different. We see a lot of real property. We see planes. Planes, trains, and automobiles and all of that. Big boats, large portfolio, massive mix of private investments, private credit, you name it. Everybody's dabbling in it.
Sure.
So trying to kind of pull all of that into the house and organize it in a way that the family office can have direction and earn its management fee, which essentially the family office is its own private investment company, exempt from SEC regulation. The family's in charge. It's managing just family money as defined by the governing structure, right, within that floating brains of the operation. And if we are going soup to nuts planning, the ultimate owners of all of this stuff are actually trusts.
Right.
That benefit the family in a lot of different ways, and there could be more than one, two, as far as you want to go, to include different parties and beneficiaries. And those sorts of components are really where I spend most of my time, which is developing the legacy structure, which is, well, one day I won't be here anymore. These assets will have continued because we've checked the box for we're taken care of financially. And now we have a different problem of, how do we keep all this together? Because I think oftentimes planners, clients too, certainly business owners, are eyes on the prize. Like, I need to, more is more, and the balance sheet is always, for a long time, that's priority one, and they're really honed in on that. And once you reach that point, everything else is so much more impactful, that requires a lot more work, and the money will grow quickly. It's shocking how fast. And people will have no taxable estate issues one day, and then all of a sudden 3 years go by and they look up and they're like, oh my gosh, we've already missed the boat. And now it's like trying to get the horses back in the barn. So the structure really involves the actual family office entity, which is typically the way we see it is usually a C Corp. And then we have a family partnership where, married couples own and manage together however they see fit. And then whatever underlying assets they have, the family office is directing, right? The trusts are there as a protective component from creditors, from minor beneficiaries who don't know how to handle money, from divorce, from estate taxes, right? Guaranteed 40%. How do we avoid that? Pretty easy solution. And this is old planning. Like, this is not Lincoln Lawyer. We're just going to come up with this random idea and like we're going to try something tricky. But the nuts and bolts of all of that is really time intensive and very specific to the family dynamic, how they work together. Does anybody even know about the wealth? And I don't know if it's regional or cultural, but very often my wealth creators are very tight-lipped about the things that they've done. They have always provided for their children, adult children who went off and are by all means successful contributors to society, but have no idea. And that's not a great place to be. That's not good planning. And that's not to say that you got to lay everything on the table and let everybody in and, be completely forthcoming about every detail. It's not that. It should be an intentional, methodical growth approach and inclusion over time, because that right there is the muscle that needs to be built and flexed in order for anything to be successful after Gen 1 is gone.
Yeah,
the money will be there, right? That part's like the easiest thing. And people focus so hard on that they totally ignore all the other parts, which are much more difficult to work through. Like, why? Why do we want to do this? Is it because my brother called me and told me, I heard about this thing on TikTok? You need a Montana LLC. I heard you can buy a Mercedes G-Wagon and ride it off your business. And I appreciate the fact that there's more information out there than ever and people are interested. But I would, recommend caution and discernment. And, if it sounds too good to be true, perhaps it is.
Probably is.
Right?
Yeah. You've done a great job describing what I would call the single family office, right? That's kind of that single family office structure. And you also highlighted the importance of kind of next gen planning, which it is, a lot of the work is right there. And, John, you've been quoting a stat recently, I think from that JP Morgan thing about family offices, is something like 37% of families initially communicate to the next generation through their philanthropic dollars.
Charitable
right?
giving.
Yeah,
Yep.
charitable giving, kind of inviting the next generation in to be givers. Our experience in working with these families is that almost all of them are highly charitable. And there's a whole nother structure around the charitable side, right? There's the private foundation, there's, sometimes use of donor advisement. So that requires a whole different level of expertise and perhaps a different form of governance. And sometimes these family offices need to outsource to someone who can do that well. Tell us a little bit about kind of the multifamily office structure, as we're just kind of working through these terms that are common. So what do you see there? How do you see that working?
Yeah, so there's great benefits to the multifamily office structure, typically because your pile and my pile means we got a bigger pile, and we might have access to different investment opportunities. We might be able to pull resources to build in-house a bigger team, be more intentional about what is outsourced. The tricky traps there are when you're bringing different families together with different visions, different missions, different priorities, you got to plan for that. Because you can almost guarantee, even within one single family, everybody is not always aligned. Period.
Sure.
That's a guarantee.
Yeah.
So within those multifamily office, most commonly what I see are families who built a business together, have been in relationship for a very long time, who trust each other on a personal level, but they've also cut their teeth in the business. So they know that the other is able to perform, right? So there's that underlying level of trust. But there's a lot to be done to make sure that, again, everybody knows what their lane is, that they stay in their lane, and that we've got some processes built around how decisions are made and how, arguments are solved, or we're not seeing eye to eye on this, or, the kids are fighting, or somebody's going through a divorce. Like, how do you do that, having to reach across the aisle when it's not your child who's causing a ruckus or something, and you are absolutely embedded within this group? So I'd say it's incredible from a resource perspective. You got a lot more wiggle room for what you can do, but requires a lot of effort to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that we can keep the train going in the same direction. 'Cause I think without constant communication and check-in and saying, hey, is this still working? People will start going in two different directions. They think they're headed in the same way, but somebody's on a train west and the other's going east. And, who knows how long that could go on before they finally reconnect and go, hold on a second. I thought you were with me over there.
Yeah.
And that could be a relationship fracture. It could be a financial fracture, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the multifamily office, I think, is an incredible way for families who want to be in collaboration and are more flexible. If a client is really keen on, and I say control, but not in a negative way, but my operators, people who want to be active and involved and, decision makers, sometimes the multifamily office, if I got two of those people, too many cooks in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be an understanding that, this is a shared approach. This is a team effort to how we get things done.
Yeah.
So it's certainly it doesn't fit for everybody. It can be wonderful for the families in which it does, and it can provide a lot to those families. But they have to be able to identify why they want to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and then what they expect this to do for them,
Sure.
which can change and honestly should change
Yeah.
over the course of its existence.
When a family shows up and maybe they're calling because their brother told them to, but they don't know why they're calling perhaps, but like, what do you think some of the surprises are that pop up when you start talking about structure and saying, okay, there is this taxable estate, there is this complexity, like, I'm sure there's some surprise at times where you're looking across the table and going, oh.
Sometimes it's a surprise.
Yeah. What do you see there?
It's hilarious. And again, you can't look at a net worth number and make any assumption about what the client knows or what conversations they may have already had with advisors. So it's a lot of digging to try and figure out, has anybody had this conversation with you?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to assume that they know, certainly. It's better if I assume they don't know and I just tell them something again, right? So oftentimes, one of my more recent engagements last year is a guy from Oklahoma, probably around my age, like mid-30s, young guy. His estate's around 150.
Mm-hmm.
He's a producer. He's working. He's ready, aim, fire. He's building something all the time. Not organized. Because he thrives in the chaos. He's like just always doing something.
Uh-huh.
But we've passed the point.
But
now
he does
where-
like to slow down and plan, right?
Well,
He likes to have long
I
meetings.
can probably count on this many fingers how many times I've pinned him down this year. But
Yeah, that's right.
it's great. He's gotten to the point now where he's like, hey, listen, I got to get some organization around this. I don't really want to be involved in it. I mean, and this is the thing.
Yeah.
I don't really want to be in the weeds with it because I don't care about that stuff.
Yeah.
What I care about is business taken care of, families taken care of, that I can keep doing my thing the way I've been doing my thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be in the middle and the muck, right? So it's interesting because lifetime estate and gift tax exemption is sometimes a very foreign word to any of these families. And I'll ask, have you ever heard of this? Or do you know anything about that? And sometimes the answer is no. I'm like, okay, well, this applies to you, right? Or it will apply to you very soon. And so let's talk about, do you care? Because again, I'm in a bit of an echo chamber. People are talking to me because they want tax mitigation, right?
Yeah.
They're open to strategic tax planning. And so they're on this scope, they're up here where we're in conversation. But I have to understand the comfortability level of the client, and do they even care? Because if I go through a whole conversation and in my mind I'm like, here's all the things we're going to do so you don't have to pay any estate tax and we can crush your income tax with tax equity and all this stuff, and at the end of the day they're like, I don't really care that much
Yeah.
about avoiding that. Okay. That's just a different that's a miss, right?
It comes back to what we talked about previously, is like the story needs to be the driver, the family's heart needs to be the driver, what they really want. And we have shown up where these tools are used, but they're like, this doesn't fit what you ever said you wanted. It might be kind of a cool little technical trick, but it just doesn't fit, you know? And so
Right.
that's a trap, right?
You know, do we even remember why we did this? I'll
Yeah.
inherit planning from another practitioner, and I'll get into these trusts and things, and I'm like, was this ever funded? And I'm talking irrevocable, you know, more complex trusts, and they're like, I have no idea. Well, do you remember why you wanted to do this? No.
An attorney
You know,
told me to.
An attorney told me to. Right. So then I just have to kind of be like, okay, well, I mean, I spend a lot of time teaching. I
Mhm.
really do. And they're new concepts. It's like launching from estate planning 101 to level 10,
Yeah.
right? So a lot of times families are like, all of a sudden I'm being pulled by my ear into this room to talk about this stuff that I have no idea what's going on. We've never had to have these conversations. Sometimes it's very little understanding of planning. Maybe they did some basic estate planning years ago. Maybe they have LLCs set up that never, there's
Yeah.
no documents. You know, oh yeah, my brother, I gave him that share of the company 15 years ago. I'm like, where?
No evidence
you
of
know,
that.
like
Yeah,
where is
yeah.
that? And so people will just go on about their lives, and until something crazy happens and they're forced to confront it, then that, you know, it can be a sobering event. Same for advisors, where it could either be I'm the bad guy for saying, and not poking holes in things, but, you know, there's some stuff you could be doing best practices. Well, why hasn't Bob told me that? I've known Bob for 20 years and he's never mentioned this to me. You know, and so sometimes people are defensive.
Sure.
Other times they're very open and they're like, I don't know what I don't know. That's why we're in this conversation, right? And so there's varying approaches to how we get there. So a lot of times it's estate planning is wonky, or it's not there at all, right? And I'm in there trying to talk to them about complex irrevocable trusts for, you know, legacy planning, and they're like, what do you mean a power of attorney? You know, so it's just always coming back to, are you hearing what I'm saying, right? Could my client leave a meeting with me, go to church on Sunday, and tell their neighbor what the planning is doing for them?
Sure. Yeah.
Could they go tell their elderly mom, we met with an attorney and this is the stuff we're doing, right? I need my clients to, even if they aren't interested in it, and I'm not going to force everybody to be passionate about estate planning, but I need them to really understand and recognize the impact and the benefit. I mean, that's mutually beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
If the client understands, they can get comfortable and they can feel confident. And it's less of, oh, well, I don't really know about that, or I need to call somebody else to ask. Or, I mean, it's really a trust thing, but it's also having the patience to get there with someone
Yeah.
who needs to know.
We had a client articulate this reality for their family recently, and it kind of resonated. It was like they had run a family business for 6 generations, and this is kind of, the business is now sold, so this is the inheriting generation, right? So previously the brothers and aunts, uncles worked in the business, and that's what kept them together. And now it's just this large pile of wealth, and it's like we're no longer in that business. We are now in this wealth management business, and it's a whole new language, and it's new levels of complexity, and it's not that they couldn't figure it out or do it, but it is like, okay, we're going to start speaking French now.
Absolutely.
It's like you need to find someone you can trust to help coordinate, strategize, and lead that team. So, yeah. So when you think about kind of who genuinely needs this model, this kind of family office model, there's, you mentioned earlier that, sometimes people try to throw a number at it and say, oh, if it's 500 million, and I understand scale and there's some pricing elements there. But when you think about who genuinely needs this kind of model, who comes to mind? What do you see?
Yeah, so sometimes it is a net worth value. sometimes the number can be the driver. Other times it's complexity of the assets. You could have less than your neighbor in a lot of different funds, vehicles, and carries and safes and all sorts of stuff that require more activity than your neighbor who has a more bread and butter stock portfolio, right? So there are varying levels of service need, but also desire for something outside of that, right? So in my mind, family office is wraparound. It's pretty much anything that the family decides fits in the family office. It's a concierge of anything.
Yeah, I always say sometimes if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office.
At a very high level.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's, and again, it's not that every family needs to staff up and buy a building and like be running this brick and mortar shop. I mean, that might be the case for the 500 million, you know, very rigid view of what a family office is. But, you know, I've seen it make financial sense at $55 or $60 million. I mean, a lot of this, the driver is, well, I can take a new tax deduction. I'm spending a lot of money on my wealth advisor fees. We exited a business. We're paying a lot of fees. Clients will say, well, I'm paying a lot of legal fees, right? Paying my CPA and paying all these people. That's just cash out for me. Now, if I structure that properly, I can essentially internalize all of those costs, right, to my family business. So there is a tax component. That generally is not the driver for why somebody's talking to me.
Sure.
Usually it's, you know, we have got a lot going on and it's not super organized and I don't feel comfortable trying to get my hands around it. And I understand that there's a lot that I don't know that I need some help on. And it's just a back and forth of, well, what do you envision for how you participate in this?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to pull my client out and just say, well, you're not capable of doing it. That's not the case.
No.
You know, so it's a bit of a choose your own adventure. Some families, you know, we'll talk about all the things you could do within the family office. You could buy a plane and you could fly private as a family and you could, you know, attend these different family governance conferences and you could have someone do your travel arrangements and all of that stuff. And for some people, I think, especially with the pre-liquidity planning, some of that's already spent, you know? So they're
Sure.
like, we have a pretty good idea of like, here's the top 3 things we want to make sure is baked into that system. But for others, it's very open-ended and they'll say, we have no idea. They don't even know what is possible there. And so it's definitely and so again, it's a living, breathing organization. This year, a family might need one thing. Next year, they might say, we didn't even use that. You know, do we need a full-time advisor in-house?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what I was going to say. Is the other thing is it's a little bit like this hybrid model, right? So even a single-family office, if they have an in-house attorney, an in-house attorney may draft some documents. But really, probably what that in-house attorney is probably doing is probably managing
outside counsel.
outside counsel, right?
That's a coordinator.
Or that's the estate planning attorney that they're managing, or the contract lawyer, or the real estate lawyer. But really, the idea of having that in-house counsel is that they're the eyes and ears, and they can help manage the outside, right? So it is this. I think it's a bit of a misnomer, and I just think it's from a scalability standpoint, it's really, really difficult to scale a single-family office. So it is a thing where often they work in conjunction with, like an office like ours, they work in conjunction with a CPA firm, they work in conjunction with a law firm. So it is just interesting to think about like that spectrum. And the other thing that I think often something that happens in the single family office world is you get one perspective, right? And is it the matriarch or patriarch that ran the business successfully that's now running the family office? Or do they actually have executive director of the family office that's really making the strategic decisions to best serve the family. So it is just interesting to figure out, like, how would you align that? And, I often joke that working in a single family office would be either the best job on the planet or the worst job on the planet. And you wouldn't know until you got there, right?
Yes, it's a lot of hats. I mean, 'cause it's a lean team typically, and you're entrusted to know, and this is what I like to call the expert generalist.
Yeah.
You got to know a lot about a lot of things at a very high level, enough to always be clocking an issue.
Yep.
We're in the middle of a transaction. There's a problem with this.
Yep.
We need further due diligence, or this is a liability risk. Something is underinsured, or you're going on that trip. There's so many things that it's constant activity of just being able to recognize.
It's basically a professional issue spotter.
It's a professional issue spotter. And the head of family office is such an important position.
Mm-hmm.
And, from my seat, I rely on that person a lot because they tend to be the coordinator because they're the connector to everybody.
Right.
If me legal needs a copy of a tax return from that CPA, I'm going to the CFO. I'm going to the head of family office and I'm saying, hey, we're working on this. They already know because they've been in conversation with me about my project.
Mm-hmm.
So that position is really key.
Yep.
So that's an interesting development for families who are starting out because when we start out, that's probably going to be them for a minute, right? Or so they think.
Yep.
Say, well, I'm going to run this show.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, you are going to run the show, right? But do you want to wear this hat and this hat and this hat and this hat? Because you become the boss again. And a lot of times this is, I've retired.
Nope,
I've sold
not
my
of you.
business. I'm like, well, get back in here, and it's even harder, and it's all your stuff on the line, right?
Yeah, I was.
Plus your family members.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing, we were at our previous firm. They had a multifamily office client that, and this is years and years and years ago, was really annoyed at the planning fees. So this guy, who's a business guy, I solve problems. That's what I do. We don't need your planning anymore. I'm going to have my secretary, that's been my secretary for 30 years. She'll just take care of all of it. Well, there's some things that firm was doing that she sure can do.
Right.
But 95% of it is not tracking expenses. Like the strategy part is so important, right? The governance part is so important. The understanding the nuance of it's fascinating. Again, like, how do you know, are you wise enough to get out of your own way, basically? And a lot of times very successful business people aren't wise enough to get out of their own way.
It takes practice.
If I recall correctly, I think that client left and then came back. Yeah. It's like, okay, I tried it. No, you're back on the team.
It's the sandbox rules.
Yeah.
You have to say, here's my highest and best use, and this is where I am really performing, and the only person for this thing is me.
Yeah.
Own that and be responsible for that.
Yeah.
And be flexible as to every other piece.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm not doing my job right, the CPA can't do their job right. If the CPA is not doing their job correctly, the advisor's not. Every single piece is connected, and any one of those being off kilter means we're not providing the best plan with full comprehensive understanding about what's going on with the family.
Yeah, and I think it's like all these family offices can look very different, as we were talking earlier. Like, they can all look very different, but there's a few universal truths, which is like, you need someone in the strategy and wisdom seat, right? And that professional issue spotter, you need that coordinator. You need someone who is going, okay, I am not just focused down here, but I am looking across the landscape, and I am making sure the ship goes in the right direction. That just kind of true across the whole.
The analogy that I love, and it is like, so I went through this phase, and I read like every Navy SEAL book on the planet, right? And I've heard this interview between two Navy SEALs, and the one was a high-ranking whatever captain, and he'd been in the SEALs for almost 20 years at the time, but whenever there was an engagement, he still walked point. So when you're in a V, when you're like that's the most risky position, right? And the interviewer asked himself, why do you still walk point even though you're the highest ranking member of the team, right? And he said, because in any given exercise, I make thousands of incremental decisions that I cannot explain to anyone else why I made them. So I come to a fork in the road or a fork in the trail, and we need to go left or we need to go right, and there's no apparent reason whether to do either one. I've been in this situation before, and I think we need to go left, so we're going left, right? But I can't go to someone else and say, hey, okay, now I'm just going to insert in you all the wisdom, all the experience I've had. So it's very similar to this thing where it's just like when you're working at a very high level, high complex strategy, and you have experience, you're making small incremental decisions every day, right? So, hey, we're going to sell this piece of real estate. Got a contract offer, or we got an offer on it, you know, and someone that's untrained would be like, oh, that's interesting, that's good, and hang up. Someone that's trained would think, okay, so should we make a charitable gift of that?
What's my cost
Is it in the right
basis?
entity? What's my right? All those
Right.
questions, right?
Yeah.
So it is just this thing where it's like, if you have the right person walking point, if you have the right person in a strategic location, they are going to make thousands of incremental decisions on a weekly basis, on an annual basis. That's going to hugely impact your trajectory over time. But it's also something that you may not be able to compute, right? What is that worth to you? I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how much we saved you. I know on these 5 transactions or on, you know, so it is this thing where it's just like that person that's making the small incremental decisions is so important.
I mean, they're so key, and the trust component to that is difficult to get to, but that person doesn't have to be the solution giver. They just have to be able to recognize and get us in the right direction to the solution,
Yeah.
even if that means we're going to another service provider. I mean, you really can't, unless you're at that 500 million plus billion plus, you know, environment. You can't keep it all in.
Yeah. Again, like
Yeah.
back to the Navy SEAL analogy, it's like, do you recognize you're standing in the middle of a minefield? Yes or no, right? So if you recognize you're standing in the middle of a minefield, you're going to make different decisions. If you're oblivious to the fact that you're standing in the middle of a minefield, you're just like, well, we're just going to walk along here, right? So it is this thing where it's like that person needs to be situationally aware. They don't need to solve the problems. They just need to be able to be like,
Let's pause.
there's a problem here, or there's a
Exactly.
potential problem here. Yeah.
And I know a really good lawyer who's a specialist and how to solve that
I mean,
problem.
it's my favorite thing to
Yeah.
work across from that kind of person, really, because
Yeah.
if they're good at their job,
Yeah.
I mean, they're a massive leverage to me too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We just,
Yeah.
And they will have seen other, you know, across from other attorneys, and so I'm always asking, you know, on your other cases close to this family scenario, what are you seeing that you like?
Yeah.
What are you seeing that you don't like? What are you seeing that's, you know, somebody's died and now we're putting everything into practice and turns out it stinks?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to know, because
Yeah.
practice is always changing. Anybody you talk to in this industry should be willing to say, it depends, I don't know,
Yeah.
that works today, and come back to you later and say, that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Take ownership for that stuff. And if the relationship that you've built, if you've done that well,
Yeah.
you weather those,
Yeah.
and the relationship continues for a very long time.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be, call me when you're doing a deal,
Yeah.
very transactional. You know, no one is served best
Yeah.
in that scenario.
Well, it is like the doctor analogy is like perfect, right? Like I might have a great cardiologist, but if I don't need a heart surgery, then we need somebody else. Do I need a neurologist? Do we need, right? So it is interesting. We were working, helping a client with a deal 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I read through the operating agreement. I didn't really like it, so I sent it to the corporate counsel at a local firm to read it, and the analysis he did on the operating agreement was impeccable and amazing. And I'm just like, I'm not ever going to read an operating agreement again, because like it's like he literally went through item by item and like, here's why I don't like that paragraph. I was just like, so really, you could have just said, let's just get a no operating agreement, right?
Right.
But he was such an expert in it that it's kind of magical to watch somebody that's that good, right? And then the other person on that was a real estate guy that does only real estate transactions. And the amount of shepherding that he gave to the process, I mean, it was magical, right? And somebody else could have done it, but we would have ended up with a much different product. So having the right expert on the team, super valuable, but it is like, who's the person that's going to connect you to the right expert?
It's not always having to be contrarian or what you've brought to me is not good enough.
Yeah,
You know, I'm the first to say that plane is fine.
yeah,
You know,
Yeah.
this does what we need today. And just like anything else, in another quarter, we'll come back and talk about it if we need to, in another year,
Yep.
5 years, whatever. But clients need to understand that piece too, because I think from a planning perspective, oftentimes it's sold to clients as you're going to be done after this and you never need to think about it again.
no.
And don't ever revisit it. You
Yeah.
put it off for this long and we're going to solve this problem
Yeah.
and put it to bed.
Yeah.
yeah. It's back to the simplicity idea.
Mhm.
Like, hey, guess what? We passed like no maintenance a long time ago, right? We passed
Exactly.
simplicity a long time ago. We're going to need complexity and we're going to need maintenance. And that maintenance isn't like every 5 years. That maintenance is like ongoing, right?
And it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be more work for the client.
You actually don't want it to be more work.
Sometimes clients
Yeah.
hear homework. All you're giving me is homework
Mm-hmm.
right now. And at the beginning, it certainly is.
Yeah.
Where I
Yep.
say, listen, this is a team effort here. In order for me to help you, you have to help me help you, right?
Yep.
So
Right.
you're going to have to pull out all the stops and get all the documents and the information, all that stuff, communicate it to me. If that's all you want to do in this, once I have an understanding about where we're headed, that could be the rhythm, right? I can come back to you when I need you to make a decision and say yay or nay on this proposal.
Yep.
I can hear from you when you say, hey, we want to buy this property, make that happen, right? It doesn't have to be so labor intensive
On the
But-
client, on the client's
on the
part.
client.
Right.
But if the
Yeah.
client doesn't want to, and they do want this structure and environment around them, they have to understand and consider that it does cost to put someone else in that seat, right? And I recently read a very interesting article on New York Magazine about these two individuals in New York and Palm Beach who essentially were swindling a lot of family offices by presenting themselves as like blue blood family new gen heirs. So they were showing up at all these events and like hosting conferences, and people were sponsoring them and letting them present. And it made me think, oh my gosh, I mean, there's always some criticism around family offices, which are like, these are novice investment firms,
Mm-hmm.
right? And without real effort and intention, you could certainly get yourself in trouble saying yes to the wrong person or somebody catching wind of.
Yep.
Like, there's a level of vulnerability there that people do need to be aware of, and interest. It's very sparkly, sexy. People think family
Sure.
office is something, right? And so I think families need to be aware of how they're presenting in that way, that at some level it is inviting some risk. So it was very interesting in understanding that it wasn't necessarily that these two individuals were, you know, presenting as an expert in any of this stuff, but it was proximity.
Yep.
It was proximity. It was being in the room, and it was having recognition and all of that tied into this industry, which can be really hard to sort through for families who are coming into it, brand new,
Yep.
trying to build it, trying to make the right decisions. Families are approached constantly. Family foundations approach constantly.
Yep.
Everybody wants something.
Sure.
And so there has to be a level of, well, we want to participate and we want to give, right? But we also don't want to be in the position where we don't have any guardrails around stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we are exposed.
Yep.
It,
Scrutiny and security.
different-
I mean, I think
yeah.
security is the new. I think security and cybersecurity are both things that family offices are really concerned about.
Woefully
And yeah.
underserviced.
Yep.
No one is thinking about that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Personal financial information,
Yep.
how we store, what platforms we use, what apps
Yeah.
are we layering on Adapar or Maestro or Oracle or whatever
Yeah.
people are using. And there's no handbook, right? Because a lot
Yeah.
of times families leave a business, they sold a lumber company, right? And they were really good at selling lumber. And now they're in the business of investing,
Right.
money management.
Mhm.
And again, that's so different. It's speaking French, but they want to be there. They just don't know how. They're not confident, also not trusting, right? It's
Sure.
hard to, and
For good reason, oftentimes.
for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'll see commercials or posts on Facebook. I mean, I'm sure you guys see this as well on LinkedIn, where I'm like, why is that person holding themselves out to know all this information about planning? It's always planning because that's personal to me. But I'm
Sure.
like, that is not even an attorney. And that's not to say that attorneys are the end all be all,
Yep.
right? At all.
I hope
But
not.
that can be really difficult
Yeah.
for clients to confidently be able to make decisions when there's
Yeah.
too much information, there's too many mixed messages.
Well, when things are complex, it opens the door to a lot of nefarious activity, right? It's like, I mean, if you sometimes you sit there listening to someone talk about the market or an investment and they just go wonk, right? All these crazy words and at the
They
end of
know
the day,
exactly
and-
what's
at,
gonna happen.
at the end of the day, you're like, I stopped listening.
You lost me in the first 30 seconds.
And so
Yeah.
so it's, so trust is a really pivotal piece. Building trust, understanding the family, understanding what they want, what is the right fit structurally, but also, again, coming back to this idea of wisdom and strategy, knowledge is just those key factors are just so important. And then building a team, I think that this work is so fun when you have a team that does have experts. You were talking earlier, when you meet that attorney who's like, hey, they're collegial, they want to work with us, and they have this fantastic expertise. It's like, this is super fun work, and we're aligning it with the family's story and their goals.
How do I build a process with that person? That's what
Yeah.
I say.
Yeah.
I say, I'm not going to try and figure out how to do that over here. I'm
Yeah.
going to keep going to you. We're going to find a way that the way I hand it to you is the way you want to be
Yeah.
handed, and vice versa.
Yep.
I mean, I latch onto that stuff pretty quickly with co-counsel and stuff, where I say, hey, I like what we got going on here.
Yep.
This is great for the clients, assuming I want to do more of these. That could be jurisdictional focused planning in Nevada or South Dakota,
Yep.
increasingly often Tennessee. That's wonderful.
Yep.
If you're doing it right, the client gets the value, you get the leverage,
Yep.
right? Develops a relationship within the network, but you have to be open to that. I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes advisors are so scarcity mindset. They're like, I have to cling to every bit, and if I'm not the solution provider here, I'm going to lose this,
Right,
even though ultimately that becomes the result later.
right.
But they don't realize that. And then the client feels bad because then they feel like they're taking something from this person they've developed a relationship with. It's difficult, but
It
this
is
work
difficult.
is so fun. I mean, it really can be fun. People will laugh, when I start talking about estate planning, because nobody wants to talk about estate planning. They're like, this is so morbid. I'm
Yeah,
afraid
talk
if I
about death
sign
a
this,
lot.
I'm going to
That's
die.
right.
There's so many layers to that.
My analogy is it's like going to the dentist. Coming to see us, sometimes it's like going to the dentist, right?
Like going through this, and I try really hard. My goal when I came right out of law school was, how can I go help older people put their plan together with a dynamic that I would want my grandparents to have
Right.
with whoever is helping them,
Yep.
And I think you just have to be willing to ask questions. It requires patience. Attorneys are not always patient.
Mm-hmm.
And when every incremental 0.6,
Mm-hmm.
so that's why the family office model works, though, is because
Yeah.
it is labor intensive. It takes time to do a good job.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing it quickly and poorly, but on the cheap, that's a lose,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
we've all seen those relationships where clients have a relationship with an attorney. The attorney is wanting to be very sensitive about their bill, so they're wanting to be very efficient. The client is like terrified about the bill, so they're wanting to be more than efficient. And meanwhile, the product that you get is garbage.
It's like fighting tooth and nail
yeah,
sometimes
that's
to
right.
get information.
So it's just like,
Well, then you end up fixing it later,
yeah, that's right.
and you end
Yeah.
up paying
Right,
more.
We're going to
Yeah.
fix it later, or
Yeah.
somebody passes away and it
Or it's broken.
doesn't go the
yeah.
way you want it to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So there, and I try and remain very cognizant of fee. I mean, it's real money, right? I don't care if you have $1 billion or
Yeah.
$10 million. Like, it's real money, and it adds up very quickly, especially
Yep.
when we're relying on a lot of different providers, and so that's where the tax deduction can be. That does start moving up
That
the line
does,
of
yeah.
priorities. But clients will say, why do I need this many people on a call? So we try and be efficient, or
Right.
at least communicative, when we pass a point. We say, hey, this is like moving outside of scope. Let's talk about how that's changed and what it's going to
Right.
necessitate when we move into the next thing. 'Cause
Well,
certainly
that's where-
clients don't want surprises.
Right. Well, that's where being aligned with the family is so important. Like, we have a ton of family. We have families we work with that, like, we've worked with them so long. We have such a great relationship with some of the external providers that we can get the ball to the 5-yard line and be like, okay, client, you need to come in, be on this call because we're talking about your tax return this year. Or we're talking,
Give
right?
us a this or a this.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, so it
that's
is a
it.
thing where it's just like, that's where having resources that actually are aligned, or it helps the client. So
Yeah. Well, Taylor, thank you again so much for joining us today. It's
you.
fun conversations. It is work that we love. And yeah, thanks for being here with us.
yep.
Thank
So,
you, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, Taylor.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Cameron.
Thank you for joining us on the Story Lens podcast. If you're navigating complex financial decisions, we're here to help. We know your story is anything but ordinary, and that's why we start there, because the right solutions are as unique as you are.
Story One Family Office, LLC, or Story One is a registered investment advisor, RIA, registered with the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Registration as an investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training, and the content of this communication has not been approved or verified by the United States Securities and Exchange Commission or by any state securities authority. Story One renders individualized investment advice to persons in a particular state only after complying with the state's regulatory requirements or pursuant to an applicable state exemption or exclusion. All investments carry risk, and no investment strategy can guarantee a profit or protect from loss of capital. Past performance is not indicative of future results. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor shall this be construed as advice for the financial needs of any individual. Story One is not permitted to offer, and no statements made during this podcast should constitute legal or tax advice. The information contained herein has been compiled by independent third parties, have been obtained from sources who are believed to be reliable. However, accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by Story One.